In the very beginning of the Federal Aviation Regulations is Part 1, and like any good book, you put the terms of words you're going to use in general definitions. So Part 1, Section 1.1, general definitions, and 1.2 is abbreviations and symbols, and then it also talks about rules of construction. So in the very beginning of the regulations, they give you a guide. In Part 1, the rules of construction give you a couple things. One thing it tells you is if in the regulations you see something like he or a male pronoun, it also includes the female. So just because they say he doesn't mean that women don't have to meet the regulation. Another one is that if they use a plural, it also includes a singular. So if they say they must do it, it also means you must do it. Singular includes the plural, plural includes the singular. This is also the section where they talk about what we talked about earlier, which is may and shall. This is FAR Part 1, Definitions and Construction. We'll see this over and over again in the regulations, the phrase except as provided. It's a lot of words, and they put it in a sentence, and it'll sound confusing, but all you have to remember is except. When you see this, there means that there's going to be an exception to the rule. Except as provided, when used in a sentence, the way that you do this is that you write down the exception. Here's an example. Except for bicycles, everyone shall park in the farthest lot. Okay, they put it kind of backwards. This is an interrupter, except for bicycles. So what I do is I write down the word bicycles, or I write exception and bicycles. Now I read the sentence and I follow it. I flip-flop them is what I'm going to do. So in this example, everyone shall park in the furthest parking lot except for bicycles. There's an old FAA joke, and it says, what is the answer to any regulation question? Yes, no, and maybe. Here's an example. 91.19, carriage of narcotic drugs, marijuana, depressant, or stimulant drugs and substances. This is the regulation. A, except as provided in paragraph B of this section, no person may operate a civil aircraft within the United States with knowledge that narcotic drugs, marijuana, and depressant or stimulant drugs or substances as defined in federal or state statutes are carried in the aircraft. B, paragraph A of this section does not apply to the carriage of narcotic drugs, marijuana, and depressant or stimulant drugs as authorized by or under any federal or state statute or by any federal or state agency. Now when I finish reading this, I don't even know what it means. I've read so many words. At the end, I forgot what I was even reading in the beginning. On second take, when I go back to this, if I read this up here, it says no person may operate a civil aircraft within the United States. So I'm thinking, can I even operate an aircraft in the United States? Okay, so let's break this down. If you remember, I said that the answer to every regulation question is yes, no, maybe. Well, this one's going to be the same. It's going to be yes, no, maybe. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the interrupter words. I'm going to mark a section for exceptions. So let's do this for instance. Except as provided in paragraph B of this section. I'm going to write except. And it's paragraph B, right? All right. No person may operate a civil aircraft within the United States with knowledge that narcotic drugs, marijuana, depressant, or stimulant drugs or substances as defined in federal or state statutes. I got a lot of words saying the same thing. Okay, I got the idea here. Drugs. Drugs are marijuana. That's a drug, depressant, or stimulant drugs. So I'm going to leave the word drugs, but I'm going to get rid of these extra words because I know what they mean now. And I'm going to get rid of as defined in federal or state statutes. Okay, you guys are going to tell me what drugs are. I got that. Okay, so now it says, no person may operate a civil aircraft within the United States with knowledge that drugs are carried in the aircraft. I got it. Now let's work on paragraph B. B, paragraph A of this section does not apply to the carriage of narcotic drugs, marijuana, depressant or stimulant drugs, or substances. Let's get rid of that. We're going to leave the word drugs, to the carriage of drugs. Okay, we know these are drugs. We'll leave or substances. We can leave it or take it out. By or under any federal or state statute or any federal or state agency. Well, so let's get rid of some of this. They've said the same thing over and over again. Authorized by or under federal or state statute. Okay, so this section does not apply to the carriage of drugs or substances authorized by any federal or state agency. Okay, so now we're going to see what we've got. Okay, so here's what we've got. So we've lined out this. Except as provided in paragraph B. Here's our sentence. No person may operate an aircraft in the United States with knowledge that drugs or substances are carried in the aircraft, except paragraph B. This is making sense now. We lined out this. This section does not apply to the carriage of drugs authorized by any or under any federal, state statute or agency. So in this, the words are still here, but I got in bold print what we have left. So let's see exactly what we've got. No person may operate a civil aircraft in the United States with knowledge that drugs or substances are carried in the aircraft, except for paragraph B, and that's authorized by the government. That's my notes. This section does not apply to the carriage of drugs authorized by any federal or state agency. So hopefully you have an idea there. The answer to this question was yes, no, maybe, and the example was authorized by a federal or state agency. So in my example of a yes, why I could carry drugs in an airplane, let's say that the federal government has arrested a drug dealer, and this drug dealer was operating out of Miami, and they were going to try the drug dealer in the federal court of Miami. Meanwhile, there was evidence, drugs, that had come from this drug dealer, which was seized in the state of Pennsylvania. So we might have a situation where the Drug Enforcement Agency authorizes me to take this evidence, these seized drugs, and fly them to Miami for a court case where the drug dealer was going to be tried by the federal government. So that's an example of where I could be authorized by the federal government to haul drugs in an airplane. So that's yes. No, here's no. I own my own airplane, and if I put illicit drugs in my airplane, they will lock me up. So there's your yes, there's your no, and maybe. Maybe's maybe. I mean, we just showed that it's definitely a maybe. You could have a situation where you had authorized. So that's our example of this little. It's kind of a tricky regulation when you get right down to it. Okay, so we're all finished up now. We're ready to summarize what we learned here. We talked about what FARs are. They're Federal Aviation Regulations, also known as a rule or a regulation. We talked about how to tell if a regulation applies to our situation. That's applicability. We also talked about how to decipher the lawyer words. Regulations are grouped by subchapter. We said the whole chapter is all the regulations. So next you have chapter, all the regulations, then you have subchapters. And then the chapters are broken, or parts come next, then subparts. And after that you have individual regulations. The regulations are in decimal, so if you put the part number first, decimal, and then the regulations, they're numbered counting up. So 21.1, after that is .2, .3, .4, .10, .11, all the way up to 99.101. The numbers to the right of the decimal points count up. And then the last thing is appendices or appendixes. They come last. Here's an example. We talked about the appendices to the FARs, and we talked about SFARs, or Special Federal Aviation Regulations. We talked about the word shall, we talked about the word may, and we talked about the phrase except as provided.